rice, half a pound of treacle. Mix it up and make it nice. Pop goes the weasel, up and down the city road, in and out the eagle. That's the way the money goes. Pop goes the weasel. Half a pound of tuppenny rice, half a pound of treacle. Mix it up and make it nice. Pop goes the weasel, up and down the city road, in and out the eagle. That's the way the money goes. Pop goes the weasel.
Three blind mice, three blind mice. See how they run, see how they run. They all run after the farmer's wife, because of their tails with a carving knife. Did ever you see such a thing in your life? Of three blind mice. Three blind mice, three blind mice. See how they run, see how they run. They all run after the farmer's wife, because of the tail with the carving knife. Did ever you see such a thing in your life? Of three blind mice.
This old man, he played one. He played knick-knack on my drum with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played two. He played knick-knack on my shoe with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played three. He played knick-knack on the tree with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played four. He played knick-knack on the door with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played five. He played knick-knack on the hive with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played six. He played knick-knack, picking up sticks with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played seven. He played knick-knack up in heaven with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played eight. He played knick-knack on the gate with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played nine. He played knick-knack on the line with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played ten. He played knick-knack with a hen with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Up Jack got and home did trot as fast as he could caper. went to bed to mend his head with vinegar and brown paper. Jill came in, how she did grin to see Jack's paper plaster. Mother vexed did smack her next for causing Jack's disaster. There's a hole in my bucket, Eliza, Eliza. There's a hole in my bucket, Eliza, a hole.
Then mended, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then mended, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, mend it.
With what shall I mend it, Eliza, Eliza? With what shall I mend it, Eliza? With what?
With straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, with straw.
The straw is too long, Eliza, Eliza. The straw is too long, Eliza, too long.
Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, cut it.
With what shall I cut it, Eliza, Eliza? With what shall I cut it, Eliza? With what?
With a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a knife.
The knife is too blunt, Eliza, Eliza. The knife is too blunt, Eliza, too blunt.
Then sharpen it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then sharpen it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, sharpen it.
With what shall I sharpen it, Eliza, Eliza? With what shall I sharpen it, Eliza? With what?
With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a stone.
The stone is too dry, Eliza, Eliza. The stone is too dry, Eliza, too dry.
Then wet it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then wet it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, wet it.
With what shall I wet it, Eliza, Eliza? With what shall I wet it, Eliza? With what?
With water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With water.
In what shall I fetch it, Eliza, Eliza? In what shall I fetch it, Eliza? In what?
In a bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. In a bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a bucket.
There's a hole in my bucket, Eliza, Eliza. There's a hole in my bucket, Eliza, a hole.
Cut a cake, baker's man. Make me a cake as fast as you can. Cut it and break it and mark it with me. Put it in the oven for baby and me. Hickory Dickory Dock. Hickory Dickory Dock. The mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck one. The mouse ran down. Hickory Dickory Dock. Hush, my baby, on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the mob wakes, the cradle will fall. Down will come baby, cradle my Hush, my baby, on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the mob wakes, the cradle will fall. Down will come baby, cradle my There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He grew whiskers on his chin again. The wind came up and blew them in again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He kicked up an awful din again. 'Cause they said he must start singing again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He went fishing with a Finnegan. Caught a fish but dropped it in again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. Climbed a tree and bought his shinnigan. Took off several yards of skin again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He grew fat and then grew thin again. Then he died and had to begin again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He grew whiskers on his chin again. The wind came up and blew them in again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He kicked up an awful din again. 'Cause they said he must start singing again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He went fishing with a Finnegan. Caught a fish but dropped it in again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. Climbed a tree and bought his shinnigan. Took off several yards of skin again. Poor old Michael Finnegan beginning. There was an old man called Michael Finnegan. He grew fat and then grew thin again. Then he died and had to begin again. Poor old Michael Finnegan. Stop!
Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, sing. You shall have a fishy on a little dishy. You shall have a fishy when the boat comes in. Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, my little man. Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, my little man. Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, sing. You shall have a fishy on a little dishy. You shall have a fishy when the boat comes in. Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, my little man. Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, my little man. Dance to your daddy, my dance to your daddy, sing. You shall have a fishy on a little dishy. You shall have a fishy when the boat comes in. Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, my little man. Dance to your daddy, my little laddie. Dance to your daddy, my little man. The grand old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill and he marched them down again. And when they were up, they were up. And when they were down, they were down. And when they were only halfway up, they were neither up nor down. The grand old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill and he marched them down again. And when they were up, they were up. And when they were down, they were down. And when they were only halfway up, they were neither up nor down.
The north wind doth blow, and we shall have snow. And what will poor Robin do then? Poor thing, he'll sit in a barn and keep himself
Sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in the pie. When the pie was open, the birds began to sing. Wasn't that a dainty dish to set before the king? The king was in his counting house, counting out his money. The queen was in the parlor, eating bread and honey. The maid was in the garden, hanging up the clothes, when down came a blackbird and pecked off her nose. Sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in the pie. When the pie was open, the birds began to sing. Wasn't that a dainty dish to set before the king? Was in his counting house, counting out his money. The queen was in the parlor, eating bread and honey. The maid was in the garden, hanging out the clothes, when down came a blackbird and pecked off her nose. She made such a commotion that little Jenny Wren flew down into the garden and popped it on again. falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. How shall we build it up again, up again, up again? How shall we build it up again, my fair lady? Build it up with silver and gold, silver and gold, silver and gold. Build it up with silver and gold, my fair lady. Silver and gold will be stolen away, stolen away, stolen away. Silver and gold will be stolen away, my fair lady. Build it up with wood and clay, wood and clay, wood and clay. Build it up with wood and clay, my fair lady. Wood and clay will wash away, wash away, wash away. Wood and clay will wash away, my fair lady. Build it up with iron and steel, iron and steel, iron and steel. Build it up with iron and steel, my fair lady. Iron and steel will bend and bow, bend and bow, bend and bow. Iron and steel will bend and bow, my fair lady. Build it up with stones so strong, stones so strong, stones so strong. Build it up with stones so strong, my fair lady. Stone will last for ages long, ages long, ages long. Stone will last for ages long, my fair lady.
Bobby Shafto's gone to sea, silver buckles on his knee. He'll come back and marry me, bonny Bobby Shafto. Bobby Shafto's bright and fair, combing down his yellow hair. He's my love forevermore, bonny Bobby Shafto. Bobby Shafto's gone to sea, silver buckles on his knee. He'll come back and marry me, bonny Bobby Shafto. Bobby Shafto's bright and fair, combing down his yellow hair. He's my love forevermore, bonny Bobby Shafto. Bobby Shafto's bright and fair, combing down his yellow hair. He's my love forevermore, bonny Bobby Shafto.
One, two, three, four, five. Once I caught a fish alive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I let it go again. Why did you let it go? Because it bit my finger so. Which finger did it bite? This little finger on the right. One, two, three, four, five. Once I caught a fish alive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I let it go again. Why did you let it go? Because it bit my finger so. Which finger did it bite? This little finger on the right.
I had a little nut tree, nothing would it bear, but a silver nutmeg and a golden pear. The king of Spain's daughter came to visit me,
boys come out to play. The moon doth shine as bright as day. Leave your supper and leave your sleep, and join your playfellows in the street. Come with a whoop and come with a call. Come with a goodwill or not at all. Up the ladder and down the wall. A halfpenny loaf will serve us all. You find milk and I'll find flour, and we'll have pudding in half an hour. Girls and boys come out to play. The moon doth shine as bright as day. Leave your supper and leave your sleep, and join your playfellows in the street.
Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumps over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such fun, and the dish ran away with the spoon.
a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow.
Here we go round the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush. Here we go round the mulberry bush on a cold and frosty morning. This is the way we clean our teeth, clean our teeth, clean our teeth. This is the way we clean our teeth on a cold and frosty morning. This is the way we brush our hair, brush our hair, brush our hair. This is the way we brush our hair on a cold and frosty morning. This is the way we clean our shoes, clean our shoes, clean our shoes. This is the way we clean our shoes on a cold and frosty morning. This is the way we button our coats, button our coats, button our coats. This is the way we button our coats on a cold and frosty morning. This is the way we sit down to rest, down to rest, down to rest. This is the way we sit down to rest on a cold and frosty morning. Here we go round the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush. Here we go round the mulberry bush on a cold and frosty morning.
Once upon a time, there were 3 bears who lived in a house in the forest. There was a great big father bear, a middle-sized mother bear, and a tiny little baby bear. One morning, their breakfast porridge was too hot to eat, so they went for a walk in the forest. While they were out, a little girl called Goldilocks came through the trees and found their house. She knocked on the door, and as there was no answer, she pushed it open and went in. In front of her was a table with 3 chairs, one great big chair, one middle-sized chair, and one tiny little chair. On the table there were 3 bowls of porridge, one great big bowl, one middle-sized bowl, and one tiny little bowl. Oh, and 3 spoons. Goldilocks was hungry, so she sat in the great big chair, picked up the biggest spoon, and tried some of the porridge from the great big bowl. But the chair was far too big and hard, the spoon was too heavy, and the porridge too hot. So Goldilocks went over to the middle-sized chair. But this chair was far too soft, and when she tried the porridge from the middle-sized bowl, it was too cold. So she went over to the tiny little chair and picked up the smallest spoon and tried some of the porridge from the tiny little bowl. This time it was neither too hot nor too cold. It was just right, and so delicious that Goldilocks ate it all up. But she was too heavy for the tiny little chair, and it broke into pieces. Then Goldilocks went upstairs, where she found 3 beds. There was a great big bed, a middle-sized bed, and a tiny little bed. First she lay down on the great big bed, but it was very big and far too hard. Next she lay down on the middle-sized bed, but that was far too soft. Then she lay down on the tiny little bed. It was neither too hard nor too soft. In fact, it felt just right, and Goldilocks fell fast asleep. In a little while, The 3 bears came back from their walk in the forest. Father Bear looked around, then roared in a great big growly voice, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." Mother Bear said in a quiet, gentle voice, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." And Little Bear said in a small, squeaky baby voice, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair and has broken it." Then Father Bear looked at his bowl of porridge and said in his great big growly voice, "Somebody has been eating my porridge." Mother Bear looked at her bowl and said in her quiet, gentle voice, "Somebody has been eating my porridge." And Little Bear looked at his bowl and said in his small, squeaky baby voice, "Somebody has been eating my porridge and is eating it all up." Then the 3 bears went upstairs. Father Bear saw at once that his bed was untidy, and he said in his great big growly voice, "Somebody has been sleeping in my bed." Mother Bear saw that her bed too had the bedclothes turned back, and she said in her quiet, gentle voice, "Somebody has been sleeping in my bed." And Little Bear looked at his bed, and he said in his small, squeaky baby voice, "Somebody is sleeping in my bed now." He squeaked so loudly that Goldilocks woke up with a start. She jumped out of bed and ran down the stairs and out into the forest. And the 3 bears never saw her again.
Once upon a time, there was a shoemaker who made very good shoes. But though he worked hard in his shop, times were difficult and he became poorer and poorer. One evening, he realized he had only enough leather to make 1 more pair of shoes. He cut up the leather and laid the pieces out on his workbench to sew in the morning when the light was better. The next morning, when he went back to his workbench, he found a beautiful pair of shoes. He examined them carefully and discovered they were made from the leather he had cut out the night before. The stitches were exquisite, very tiny and neat, and he knew the shoes were far better than any he could have made. Quickly, he took down his shutters and placed the shoes in his shop window. Soon the door opened, and in came a grand gentleman. He bought the shoes and paid 4 times more than the price of an ordinary pair. With this money, the shoemaker bought more leather and enough food for several days. That evening, he sat at his workbench and cut out 2 pairs of shoes from his new leather. In the morning, he could scarcely believe his eyes, for there, on his workbench, were 2 beautiful pairs of shoes. Who could sew such tiny stitches, he wondered, and who could work so fast? He placed the shoes in the shop window. Rich people who had never visited his shop before came in to buy them and paid a lot of money for them. Each night for many weeks, the same thing happened. 2 pairs, sometimes 4 pairs, were made in a night. The shoemaker cut out all sorts of shoes: men's shoes, ladies' shoes, little children's shoes, dancing shoes, party shoes, shoes with laces, shoes with straps and buckles. He became well known for the excellent shoes he sold, and each week he took even more money in his shop. One evening, just before Christmas, his wife suggested they should peep around the door of the workroom to see if they could find out who was making the shoes. As the town clock struck midnight, there was a scuffling and a scurrying by the window, and 2 tiny little men squeezed through a crack in the shutters and hurried over to the workbench. They took their tiny tools from their work bags and began to work. They stitched and hammered and stitched until a row of new shoes lay on the workbench. Then, their work finished, the elves left everything neat and tidy and vanished. As it was just before Christmas, the shoemaker's wife suggested they should give presents to the two little men who had helped them so much during the year. The next day she made 2 little green jackets and trousers and green hats to match, and her husband stitched 2 tiny pairs of boots. The shoemaker and his wife laid these gifts out on the workbench that evening, together with 2 little glasses of wine and plates with little cakes and biscuits. They then kept watch again. At the stroke of midnight, they saw the elves scramble into the workshop and climb onto the workbench as they had done before. When they saw the little green jackets, trousers and hats, and tiny boots, the elves gave a shout of joy. They tried on their new clothes straight away and were so delighted they danced around the workbench, waving their hats in the air. They then sat down and ate all the food that had been left out and disappeared as before. After Christmas, the shoemaker still cut out the shoes and left the pieces on his workbench. But the elves never returned. They knew the shoemaker and his wife must have seen them, for their clothes were exactly the right size, and fairy people do not like to be seen. But the shoemaker was now so well known that he had plenty of customers. Although his stitches were not as tiny and neat as the elves' stitches, no one ever noticed. For many years he was known as the best shoemaker in town, and he and his wife were never poor again.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived with her mother on the edge of a forest. Her grandma gave her a cloak and hood made of red velvet. The little girl liked it so much that she always wore it, and so became known as Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother asked her to take a basket of food to her grandma, who wasn't feeling very well. The cottage where Grandma lived was in the middle of the forest. So, Little Red Riding Hood set off. She hadn't walked very far when she met a wicked wolf. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I'm taking this food to my granny," she said. "That's very kind of you. Where does your granny live?" he asked. "Just down this path, near the 3 large oak trees." The wolf smiled a wicked smile. "Why not pick some flowers for her?" he said. Red Riding Hood thought that this was a good idea. The wolf smiled once again and ran off to find Grandma's cottage. When he got there, he knocked at the door. "Come in," called Grandma. The wolf opened the door and in a flash ran over to her bed and gobbled her up with one gulp. He then put on her nightcap and glasses, climbed into bed and waited for Little Red Riding Hood to come. Soon he heard a knock at the door. Come in," he called. Little Red Riding Hood opened the door and went over to the bed. "Oh, Granny," she said, "what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with," said the wolf. "But, Granny, what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with," replied the wolf. "And, Granny, what big teeth you have." "All the better to eat you with," the wolf growled, and scarcely had he said that than he jumped out of bed and swallowed her up with one great gulp. Just then, a woodman called to see how Grandma was. But when he saw the wolf lying in Grandma's bed, he took his axe and killed it with one blow. "Grandma, Little Red Riding Hood, where are you?" he called. "We're in here," came a faint voice from inside the wolf. The woodman cut the wolf open, and out popped Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma. "Oh, thank you for saving us from the wicked wolf," said Grandma. With the wicked wolf gone, Little Red Riding Hood and Grandma lived happily ever after.
Once upon a time, there was a gentleman who lived in a lovely house with his charming wife and his beautiful daughter. Until one sad day, the gentleman's wife died His new wife was neither kind nor pretty, and she had 2 daughters who were known by everyone in the town as the Ugly Sisters. The Ugly Sisters hated their new stepsister. They were cruel to her and made her do all the housework. At night, the Ugly Sisters would sleep in the finest warm soft beds, whilst their poor stepsister was forced to huddle by the fire in the kitchen to keep warm, practically sitting in the ashes and cinders. One day, the Ugly Sisters saw her asleep in the cinders and decided to call their new stepsister Cinderella. The king and queen of the country had a son. One day, they decided to hold a ball for the prince in the hope that he might find a bride. The Ugly Sisters could hardly contain their delight. They immediately rushed out to buy new dresses and talked of nothing else but the ball. By the time the 3 of them left in their coach, Cinderella was so exhausted she could only kneel down by the kitchen fire and weep. She so much wanted to go to the ball. Suddenly, she realized that she was not alone. She looked up to see a beautiful lady holding a silver wand. The lady spoke. "Cinderella," she said, "I am your fairy godmother. Why are you crying, child?" Cinderella sobbed. "Oh, how I wish I could have gone to the ball." "Then you shall go to the ball," said the fairy godmother. "But first, we have some work to do. Run to the garden and fetch a large pumpkin." Cinderella could not believe her ears, but she did as the fairy godmother said and fetched the biggest pumpkin she could find. With one wave of her wand, the fairy godmother turned it into a gleaming golden coach. "Now for something to pull the coach," said the fairy godmother. "Fetch me some mice from the mousetrap." Cinderella ran to the larder and found 6 mice running around in a wooden cage. She took them to the fairy godmother, and with a swish of her wand, they became 6 tall, dappled horses. The fairy godmother then turned a rat into a smart coachman and 2 lizards Cinderella found in the water barrel into 2 splendid footmen. Her godmother touched her with her wand, and suddenly Cinderella was dressed in the most beautiful silver ball gown and the prettiest pair of glass shoes she had ever seen. "Now, Cinderella," said her godmother, "you shall go to the ball, but be sure you are back before the clock strikes midnight." When Cinderella arrived at the ball, the prince was struck by her beauty. No one knew who she was. Not even the Ugly Sisters recognized her. The prince danced with Cinderella all night, but she was having so much fun, she didn't realize how quickly time was passing. Suddenly, she heard the clock strike the first stroke of midnight. She let out a cry and then ran away from the prince as fast as she could. As she ran down the steps of the palace, one of her shoes fell off, but she didn't have time to stop and pick it up. The prince ran after her, but she had already gone. As he made his way back into the palace, he found the glass shoe on the steps. He realized that it belonged to the beautiful and mysterious lady he had been dancing with. The next day, the palace issued a proclamation that the prince was to tour the country looking for the lady whose foot fitted the glass shoe. Whoever fitted the shoe, he would marry. The prince travelled for weeks with no success. Eventually, he came to the Ugly Sister's house. "It'll fit me!" cried the first Ugly Sister. But when she tried, there was no way it would squeeze on her foot. The second ugly sister snorted with laughter and said, "I'm sure it will fit me. Let me have a try." The prince tried the shoe, but the second ugly sister could barely get her toe in. Then Cinderella stepped forward. "May I try?" she asked. "You?" shrieked her stepsisters. "You weren't at the ball." But Cinderella slipped her foot into the shoe, and it was a perfect fit. The fairy godmother then appeared and touched Cinderella with her wand. She was immediately changed back into the wonderful gown she had worn at the ball. The prince went down on one knee and asked Cinderella to marry him. Cinderella agreed, and there was soon a fine royal wedding for Cinderella and the prince, and they lived happily ever after.
One day, a long time ago, a poor woodcutter was working hard, chopping wood deep in the forest. Suddenly, the woodcutter looked up to see a pixie sitting on a leaf.
"I've come to give you 3 wishes. Everything you wish for will come true. But remember, you only have 3 wishes, so use them wisely."
Then the pixie disappeared. The woodcutter ran back home to where his wife was making dinner. She laughed when he told her what had happened.
"You must have dreamt it."
However, just in case it was true, they decided to think carefully before they made any wishes. "I'm hungry," said the woodcutter. "Let's eat first, then afterwards we'll think about the 3 wishes."
"I'm afraid it's only cabbage soup. We haven't enough money left for any meat."
"Not soup again," said the woodcutter. "How I wish we had a nice fat sausage to eat." Suddenly, a large fat sausage appeared on the table.
"Now look what you've done. That's 1 wish already gone, and you've used it on a sausage."
She continued shouting at the woodcutter until he could stand it no longer. "I wish that sausage was at the end of your nose," he said. And immediately the sausage jumped off the table and attached itself to the end of his wife's nose. The woodcutter laughed at the sight of his wife with a big sausage dangling in front of her face, and this made her all the more angry. However, the woodcutter soon realized there was only 1 wish left, and he stopped laughing. "Let's wish," he said, "for all the money and riches in the world."
"But what good will that do? When I've a big sausage hanging from the end of my nose, I'd be too embarrassed to go anywhere and spend any of the money."
After much thought, the woodcutter and his wife finally agreed that they would have to use the last wish to remove the sausage. The woodcutter made the wish, the sausage disappeared, and then the woodcutter and his wife sat down for their supper. They both agreed how foolish they'd been to use the pixie's wishes so unwisely. And as they ate their cabbage soup, they wished, too late by now, that they'd eaten the sausage in the first place.
Once upon a time there was a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter. One day the king sent for the miller. The miller was so scared at seeing the king that he said the first thing that popped into his head. "I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold," he said. The king was intrigued by this and told the miller to bring his daughter to the castle. The next day, as instructed, the miller took his daughter there. The king led her into a room full of straw. The only other things in there were a stool and a spinning wheel. "You must spin all this straw into gold by the morning, or else you must die," said the king. Then he locked the door behind him. The miller's daughter sat down with astonishment. She had no idea how to spin straw into gold, and very soon the thought of what would happen to her in the morning made her cry. Suddenly the door flew open, and in walked a strange little man with a long ginger beard. "What will you give me said the man, if I spin this straw into gold for you by the morning? I will give you my necklace, said the girl. The little man took the necklace and straight away started spinning. He worked all night until, just as the sun rose, he finished. Before the miller's daughter could thank him, he had vanished. The king was surprised and pleased to see all the gold, but this only made him more greedy. He led the girl into a second room, larger than the first one. It too was full of straw. This time he said, if you spin the straw into gold by morning, I shall make you my queen. Very soon the girl sat alone, crying. The strange little man appeared once more. What will you give me if I spin the straw for you this time? He said. Alas, I have nothing to give you, said the girl. The mannequin thought for a while and then said, promise me that if you become queen, you will give me your first child. The girl thought the prospect of this happening was so remote that she gave her word and agreed to the mannequin's promise. So once more the little man sat himself at the spinning wheel and spun all the straw into gold. The king was filled with joy when he saw the gold, and soon after he married the miller's daughter, and she became his queen. A year after they were married, the queen gave birth to a lovely baby. Both king and queen were very happy. Indeed, the queen had been so happy since her marriage that she had quite forgotten about the strange little man and her promise to him, until one evening the door to her bedroom burst open and in walked the mannequin. Now, give me what you promised, he said, pointing to the baby. The queen was horrified and held her baby tightly. She pleaded with the mannequin not to take her child and instead offered him all the riches in the kingdom. But when he refused, she broke down and wept bitterly. Seeing this, the mannequin felt pity on the queen and decided to give her one last chance. I will give you 3 days, he said, and if in that time you can guess my name, you can keep your child. The next day, the queen sent her messenger to collect all the boys' names he could find. In the evening, when the little man returned, the queen repeated the list of names to him. But after each name, the mannequin said, No, that is not my name. The same happened the next day, and on the 3rd day the messenger was once again sent out. It was quite late when the messenger returned and went straight away to see the queen. On the way back to the castle, he said, I took a route through the woods. I came across a little house with a fire burning outside and the strangest little man I have ever seen singing and dancing around it. And this is what he was singing. Although today I brew and bake, tomorrow the queen's own child I'll take. This guessing game she'll never win, for my name is Rumpelstiltskin. On hearing this, the queen was overjoyed, and when the mannequin arrived that night, she questioned him as though she did not know his name. Is your name Twinkletoes? She asked. No, that is not my name, he replied. Is your name Theophily? She asked. No, that is not my name, he replied. Is your name by any chance Rumpelstiltskin? What? Shrieked the man. How did you know? Her witches told you, he shouted. He jumped up and down with anger and then stomped furiously out of the room. The mannequin was never seen again, and the king, queen, and their child lived happily ever after.
Once upon a time, there was a prince. The prince was unhappy because he wanted to marry a princess, but he wanted her to be a real princess. One day, the prince set off to search the world for a real princess whom he could marry. He met many princesses, but there was always something that wasn't quite right. They were either too tall, too small, too happy, or too sad. Besides, he was never sure if they were real princesses. Some months later, the prince returned home, still without a princess, and very unhappy. Then one night, there was a terrible storm. The rain poured, the wind blew, and thunder and lightning shook the royal castle. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. The old king took a candle and went to see who it could be. There, standing outside in the pouring rain, was a beautiful girl. She was so wet that water poured off her hair and clothes. Suddenly she spoke. "I am a real princess," she said. The old king was intrigued, so he ushered her inside and called the queen, the prince, to come and see. The prince could not believe his ears when he heard her say, "I am a real princess." The old queen also heard it and made up her mind to find out if this girl was indeed a real princess. Whilst the girl was being bathed and dried and dressed in dry clothes, the queen went to see about a bedroom for her. The queen had all the bedclothes taken off the bed. Then she placed a dried pea under the mattress. 20 more mattresses were put on top, followed by 20 soft sheets. At the end of all that, the bed was so high that a tall ladder was needed to get in and out of it. When the princess had eaten and warmed up, the queen led her to bed and tucked her in. As the queen blew out the candles, she thought to herself, "Now we shall discover if you are a real princess or not." In the morning, the queen went to wake the girl. However, she was already awake. The queen said, "How did you sleep, my dear?" "Not very well," replied the girl. "I do not know what was in the bed, but it was something hard, and now I ache all over." On hearing this, the queen was overjoyed, for she knew that only a real princess would have skin so sensitive to feel a pea through 20 mattresses and 20 soft sheets. She rushed to tell the prince the good news. He was overjoyed to discover that he had at last found a real princess. The queen now removed the pea and many of the mattresses and sheets, so that the princess would in future sleep well. The prince and his real princess were soon married, and there was great joy throughout the kingdom. As for the pea, it was placed in a museum. It may still be there today, unless someone has eaten it.
In the forest, there was a clearing where all the animals gathered each evening after going to the river to drink. The tortoise was usually the last to arrive, and the other animals would laugh at him as he plodded into the clearing. "Come on, slow coach," they would call out as he came through the grass towards them. The tortoise would blink at them and continue slowly on his way until he reached the spot where he wanted to settle down. The liveliest of all the animals in the forest was the hare. He ran so fast that he was always the first to arrive at the clearing. "Just look at me," he was boasting one evening. "I can run faster than any of you." The tortoise ambled into the clearing, last as usual. To everyone's surprise, he went slowly across to the hare. "Since you run so fast, could you beat me in a race?" he asked. "I beat you in a race?" exclaimed the hare, and he fell on the ground laughing. "Of course I would beat you. You name the distance, Tortoise, but don't make it too far for your short little legs." And he roared with laughter again. Most of the other animals laughed too. It did seem a very funny idea. The fox said, "Come on then, Tortoise. Name the distance and the time, and then we will all come to watch." "Let us start tomorrow morning at sunrise," suggested the Tortoise. "We'll run from this clearing to the edge of the forest and return along the bank of the river to this spot again." "Why, it will take you all day to go so far, Tortoise. Are you sure you want to go ahead with it?" asked the Hare. He grinned at the thought of the easy victory he would have. "I am sure," replied the Tortoise. "The first one back to this clearing will be the winner." "Agreed," said the Hare, as the Tortoise settled down in some long grass to sleep for the night. The next morning the clearing was full of animals who had come to see the start of the great race. Some ran along to the edge of the forest, others chose good places to watch along the way. The Hare and the Tortoise stood side by side. As the sun rose, the Fox called, "Ready, steady, go!" The Hare jumped up, and in no time at all he was far ahead of the Tortoise, almost out of sight. The Tortoise started off in the same direction. He plodded along, slowly picking up his feet, then slowly putting them down, only a little in front of where they had been before. "Come on, Tortoise," called his friends anxiously, but he did not lift up his foot to wave at them as the Hare had done. He kept on moving slowly forwards. In a few minutes the Hare was a long way from the starting line, so he slowed down. "It's going to take the Tortoise all day," he thought, "so there's no need for me to hurry." He stopped to talk to friends and nibble juicy grass here and there along the path. By the time he reached halfway, the sun was high in the sky and the day became very hot. The animals who were waiting there saw the Hare turn back towards the clearing. They settled down for a long wait for the Tortoise. As he returned by the river, the hot sun and the grass he had eaten made the Hare feel sleepy. "There's no need to hurry," he told himself. "Here's a nice shady spot." And he stretched himself out comfortably on the ground. With paws beneath his head, he murmured sleepily, "It won't matter if Tortoise passes me. I'm much faster than he is. I'll still get back first and win the race." He drifted off to sleep. Meanwhile, the Tortoise went on, slowly. He reached the edge of the forest quite soon after the Hare, for he had not stopped to talk to friends or eat tempting fresh grass. Before long, smiling gently, he passed the Hare sleeping in the shade. The animals in the clearing waited all day for the Hare to return, but he did not arrive. The sun was setting before they saw the Tortoise plodding towards them. "Where is the Hare?" they called out. The Tortoise did not waste his breath in answering, but came steadily towards them. "Hurrah! Tortoise has won! Well done, slow coach!" the animals cheered. Only when he knew he had won the race did the Tortoise speak. "Hare? Oh, he's asleep back there by the river." There was a sudden flurry, and at great speed the Hare burst into the clearing. He had woken, and seeing how long the shadows were, realized he had slept for much longer than he intended. He raced back to the clearing, but he was too late. Tortoise smiled and said, "Slow and steady wins the race."
Once upon a time, there was a king and his new queen who were very happy. Nearly a year after they were married, the queen gave birth to a beautiful daughter. The king was so proud of his new baby that he ordered the most magnificent christening feast ever seen. The king wanted the good fairies to be godmothers. There were 13 fairies in the kingdom, but one was very old and had not been seen for some time. So only 12 of the fairies were invited. When the feast was over, the fairies went up to the baby girl to give their magic gifts. The first fairy said, "You shall have a beautiful face." The second fairy said, you shall be loving and kind. And so it went on, until suddenly the 13th fairy burst in. She was furious that the king had not invited her. She pointed to the baby and said, "When this child is 15 years old, she will prick her finger on a spindle and fall down dead." With that, she disappeared. The 12th fairy had not yet given her wish. She could not undo the evil spell, but she could soften it. She said, "When your child is 15 years old, she will not die, but rather she will sleep for 100 years. In time, the baby grew up to be a beautiful princess, and all the wonderful gifts of the good fairies came true. However, she knew nothing of the curse that had been placed on her, and on the morning of her 15th birthday, she got up early and went to explore the castle. She went through a door and up a winding staircase that she had never climbed before. She opened the door at the top of the staircase, and there, in the room, was an old woman spinning flax into thread. The princess decided that she would try to spin and sat at the spinning wheel. No sooner had she picked up the spindle when the words of the 13th fairy came true. She pricked her finger.
Ow!
The princess fell down upon the bed in a deep sleep, and all at once so did every man, woman, child, and animal in the whole kingdom. A hedge of thorns grew around the castle, and every year it grew taller and thicker, until only the flags on the highest turrets could be seen. One day, a prince from a far-off kingdom heard about Sleeping Beauty and decided to try and wake her. The prince took out his sword and began to cut the thorn bush. But at each cut, the thorns turned to roses and opened to let him through. Once inside the silent castle, the prince soon found Sleeping Beauty. He thought she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen, and bent over to kiss her. Sleeping Beauty opened her eyes. At the same time, every person and animal in the castle began to wake. The prince took Sleeping Beauty's hand, and together they went to see the king and queen. Sleeping Beauty and the prince were soon married, and they lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, there was a little old man and a little old woman. One day, the little old woman decided to make a gingerbread man. She said to her husband, "I shall make his eyes from 2 currants, his mouth and nose from bits of lemon peel, and his waistcoat from sugar." So the little old woman made the gingerbread man and popped it into the oven to bake. Before long, it was time for the gingerbread man to be ready. The little old woman was just bending down to the oven when she heard a tiny voice. "Let me out! Let me out!" It was coming from inside the oven. The little old woman opened the oven door, and all at once the gingerbread man jumped out and onto the floor. He straightway ran out of the kitchen door. The gingerbread man ran off down the road, and the little old woman and the little old man ran after him. "Stop, little gingerbread man!" they shouted. But the gingerbread man carried on running and cried, "Run, run as fast as you can! You can't catch me! I'm the gingerbread man!" And they could not catch him. The gingerbread man carried on running and soon met a cow. "Stop! Stop, little man!" said the cow. "You look good to eat." But the gingerbread man just ran even faster, saying, "Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man." And the cow could not catch him. The gingerbread man carried on running and soon met a horse. "Stop, stop, little man," said the horse. "You look good to eat." But the gingerbread man just ran even faster, saying, "Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man." And the horse could not catch him. A little further on, he met a sly old fox. "Stop, stop, little man," said the fox. "I want to talk to you." But the gingerbread man kept running, and the fox ran after him. The fox again called out, "Stop, stop, little man. I want to talk to you." But the gingerbread man only ran faster still and shouted, "Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man." Very soon they came to a river. The gingerbread man stopped, and so did the fox. "Oh dear," cried the gingerbread man. "I want to keep on running, but I can't cross the river." "Jump onto my tail," said the sly old fox, "and I'll swim across." So the gingerbread man jumped onto the fox's tail, and he began to swim across the river. A little way from the shore, he said, "Gingerbread man, you're getting too heavy for my tail. You will soon get wet. Climb onto my back instead." So the gingerbread man climbed onto the fox's back. A little further across the river, the sly old fox said, "Gingerbread man, you're getting a little heavy for my back. You will soon get wet. Climb onto my nose instead." So the gingerbread man climbed onto the tip of the fox's nose. It was not long before the sly old fox reached the other side of the river, and as soon as he reached the shore, he tossed the gingerbread man into the air, opened his mouth, and snap went his teeth. And the sly old fox licked his lips and walked away.